Good morning. We're going to begin reading this morning where we've left off in our book Minors, which was our class read aloud. It's a book by Kevin Sylvester, and it's pretty exciting. It's a little bit dark, as we've noticed, but we've been talking a little bit about what kind of character traits these characters have and how the changes in the plot really drive this book forward. In our previous books, we've talked a lot about character development. In this particular book, the setting is a really important part of the book. Without the setting, the whole story wouldn't really take place. So that's kind of the focus of this particular book. We're on chapter 13, so this is chapter 13. And probably I'll get as far as this chapter in this video. It might take two videos to do it because it's a fairly long chapter. Chapter 13 is called Sleepwalking. I sat against the side of the tunnel with my knees scrunched up between my arms, keeping my distance from Elena, who was sitting with her back against the opposite wall, her legs stretched out in front of her. She couldn't seem to keep them still. We were able to turn off the lights in one section of the tunnel, so that became the sleeping quarters. Everyone else had gone to bed, but Elena and I moved back to a lighted part to speak. She was filling me in on what had happened since the attack, but I just stared at her, dumbstruck. I remembered the feel of her fingertips on mine just before the bombs hit. Her lips were moving, but I could only remember how close they'd been to mine just before the Landers had attacked. It had been only 3 days, but she was so different in every possible way. She had shaved half her head. Most of it had burned off in the attack. I just finished it off, she said. I'm not sure how much will grow back, if any. There were wounds on her face. When the bullets started flying, I was hit, more by the shrapnel than the bullets. So you were able to get up after the first bomb hit us? She nodded. I was on the playground when another bomb went off. I woke up covered in rubble. By some miracle, the metal from the swing set had created kind of a roof over me. I was pinned, but not crushed. I could breathe and I could see. I could also hear that the shooting had ended. I stayed as still as possible till I saw a chance to escape. Escape? Well, it wasn't really an escape in the end. They kind of all left, and I just got up and made my way down here. I'd seen your dad grab you and head for the roof, so I figured that's where everyone went. Everyone who wasn't killed. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Did you see him die? Elena shook her head. They'd all retreated to the middle of the field, trying to draw the fire away from the core scraper. I was running to help them or die with them when the second bomb knocked me out. We were silent for a long time. I stared at Elena while she rubbed her legs and stared at the ground. She lifted her head and looked straight into my eyes. Then, after they... What did you want us to call them? Oh, fearless leader? Landers? I nodded. She rolled her eyes. After the Landers left, I snuck back into the core scraper through a crack in the roof. There were plenty of those. I grabbed some supplies from my apartment, changed, and hailed the elevator. To be honest, I was totally surprised that the elevator worked. So was I. If I'd known it was you. It took me a whole day to figure out a way to open that stupid blast door, by the way. Thanks for shutting that on me. I'm sorry. Elena held up her hand. I'm just hassling. It was a sound decision. Real leadership, in fact. She actually gave me a little salute that didn't seem ironic. I saw black boots under the door. You were wearing red boots at the party. Well, they were red, she said, lifting her leg so I could get a closer look. The boots had been scorched black, the leather crackling and flaking. Elena's pants rode up her leg a bit, and I could see blisters and burns on her as well. She quickly tugged her pant leg into her socks. Are you okay? I asked, shaken. Sure, she shrugged. I basically had to rip the leggings off. They melted into my skin, so some of that skin came off too. Well, that sucks. She shrugged. Yeah, but I'm alive. Once I was in the infirmary, I was able to put some cream on the worst burns. My legs feel better now, more irritated than painful. The infirmary. I'd forgotten all about Alec. Did you see Alec? Yeah, I saw him. He's alive. I let out a relieved phew. I should say he was barely alive, more like a zombie. As soon as I came through the infirmary door, he came rushing at me with a scalpel. Luckily, I recognized him and yelled, Alec, it's me, Elena. One look at me, and he just dropped the scalpel and stood there like a statue. So why isn't he with you? He followed me for a bit while I walked around looking for a way to turn off those stupid emergency flashers and get some real light down here. The emergency backup room? Well, I look for it. It's just past the entrance to Tunnel 4, but you probably didn't know that. Alex started muttering something about threes and rights and lefts, and then he just sat down on the floor and refused to move. I gave him directions to follow us. I figured that out pretty quickly, but he'd forgotten the first bit. Elena stared at me. But I know how your brain works, Christopher Nichols, and I figured if you ended with 3, you'd start with 3, so I headed down Tunnel 3. That's how you found the camp? She nodded. And it took a while for the lights to actually kick in, which is why the kids looked so scared when I showed up. And then you blasted out of the wall like that, and I guess there are no adults down here. I shook my head. Didn't think so. She stared at the floor. But Alec is still out there. I said, well, we have to go find him. Elena didn't move. I couldn't carry him in the dark. He was asleep when I left, hugging some crumpled up piece of paper. I'm sure we can find him in the morning. I calmed down, but my head was still swimming with questions. Wait, how did you open the blast door again? My dad was the foreman down here, remember? I knew there was always a backup system, even for the backup system. Meaning? Well, meaning that your detonator cap only blew off the top layer of the panel. The wires underneath were still there. I just needed to figure out a way to get them to recognize the right sequence of electric bursts. I tapped them together in different combinations, and one of them finally worked. I must have looked skeptical. What, you think you're the only genius here? She smiled, a real smile, and for a moment I saw the old Elena. I smiled too. I looked for you right after the first bombs hit, I said. She closed her eyes. The smile vanished. Idiot, I said to myself. It was chaos up there. I was in a crater after the first bomb, then running through that black smoke, and then under that pile of rubble. There's probably no way you'd have seen me. The landers didn't, thank goodness. She paused and gave a deep sigh. They just marched straight at the field, firing at everything that moved. Or didn't. I saw it too. She paused. You saw some. After you left? It almost sounded like an accusation. After you left, I heard them talking. They walked all around me, giving orders. Some spoke English. Some spoke Spanish. Some spoke other languages I couldn't pick up. And they've been waiting for the blackout. They're here to steal the ore. So that's a really important part of the book, really important thing to note because it's really part of the whole story. So they're there to steal the ore because, as you recall, Melming Mining is on the planet Perseus to mine the ore to bring back to Earth. And if you remember, Melming Mining guaranteed that they would provide the ore to everyone in the world, not for money and not just certain countries that could pay for it. So these sound like kind of like pirates. They're here to raid and take the ore. Any idea who they're working for? She shook her head. Once they finished attacking, they all got back in the ship and just took off. Which direction? South. I nodded. Toward the main storage depots. Well, duh. They're pirates, Christopher. They'll take everything and leave us here to die. So they don't even know there are survivors down here? Elena gave an annoyed snort. Either they didn't see or they didn't care. What can a bunch of kids do, right? Something in her tone suggested she agreed. Even if they do know about us, they probably just figure we'll die of starvation. They might be right. Elena said, I saw what you left behind in the cafeteria. There's not enough food there to last more than a month. We'll find more. Elena smirked. The break rooms? There's not enough in those either. Where do you think all the extra food for the party came from? And how long do you think all those vegetables and stuff will last before they go bad, even in a refrigerator? I had actually thought of that, but it was not a cheery thought, so I changed the subject. Just one ship? Elena threw up her hands. Yes, one ship. One big ship. One big big enough to carry them and their weapons. So they all left, I said, thinking out loud. Which means we can go back to the core scraper for more salvage to help us survive. She stood up suddenly and glared at me. Her voice was trembling. Survival? That's your big plan. Survive? That's what we do. We need to... She cut me off. Her eyes were blazing. We need to fight. That's what you should be working out. A battle plan. How do we fight those stupid landers? How do we kill them? Elena was now standing over me, her fists clenched so tightly her fingers were turning white. Her rage took me off guard. I stayed on the floor and looked straight ahead, avoiding her eyes. I'm going to stop this video. I'll continue on the next one.